We are delighted, and I'm very privileged to introduce Kimberly Cartwright in a few minutes. She is a teacher of God and one that really, she volunteers her services often for the foundation. She's on the monthly conference calls, and she is an awesome teacher and presenter. She is one of the presenters at the conference that will be held in Boston next year in 2019. Yeah, it's great. Kimberly's talk is going to be about having the courage to be free. She's going to really take us to our own contemplation, our own kind of checkpoint, if you have the courage to look. Please give a warm welcome to Kimberly Cartwright.
Thank you. Hi, live streamers. I'm usually on the other side of this camera. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, everybody. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you so much, Bill and Lisa, for inviting me, for letting me spend the night at your house. It's like half the reason I come is to just be able to hang at your house because it just feels so good. And I also do this because this is God's will, right? It's so cool to have somebody say, hey, Kimberly's a great teacher. And Kimberly, it's not Kimberly. I'm so happy I'm not thinking I'm Kimberly. It's just such a nice place to be. No, it really is, because it keeps it real. That's what it does. So I'm sharing this morning from my experiences and what's been kind of alive for me. I didn't want to have you miss a thing. So I actually wrote down what I'm saying. I'm pretty good at like seeming kind of extemporaneous, even though I'm reading it, but I'm going to read what I've written because it's really, it's important. It wants to be conveyed. So is that okay if I do a little bit of reading? Thank you. And we're going to start now, as you can see on here, it says the river of change. Let's just take a breathe in and breathe out just on that. The river of change. We're at Unity on the River. So this is a good place to talk about the river of change. And as sort of an invocation, I'm going to share the prayer of the Hopi elders as our invocation. So ground yourself. If you can put both of your feet on the floor, get your sit bones rooted, relax your shoulders, and open your heart. A Hopi elder speaks. You've been telling the people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell the people that this is the hour, and there are things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Are you in right relation? Where is your water? Know your garden. It's time to speak your truth. Create your community. Be good to each other. And do not look outside yourself for the leader. Then the Hopi elder clasped his hands together, smiled, and said, this could be a good time. There is a river flowing now, very fast. It's so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they are torn apart and will suffer greatly. No, the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, keep our eyes open and our heads above water, and I say, see who's in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we're to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. The time for the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves, banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. I want you to remember both that image of the river, that powerful river, and that we are the ones that we've been waiting for. So let's get to the beginning of this. A few days ago, on June 19th, we celebrated a holiday in our country called Juneteenth. How many people here know Juneteenth? Okay, so it's a celebration in commemoration of the announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation to slaves in Texas. And it is a celebration actually that takes place all over the world. It's a commemoration of the freedom of enslaved people, and slavery is a fact on every continent on the planet. So there's some form of a Juneteenth celebration all over the planet. So we're standing, a few days past Juneteenth. And then also coming up in front of us is the 4th of July, which is another celebration of freedom, free will, and independence. So that's kind of where I rooted myself in talking about the courage to be free. And I want to specifically talk about the way that Jesus spells out a freedom formula in A Course in Miracles, and how Jesus and all of the radicals, the heretics, and the maladjusteds of the world followed this exact same formula. And then I'm going to be asking that we look at our own selves and ask ourselves, where are we not free? And do we have the willingness to be free? Am I willing to cross the river of change? So everyone that we admire and respect, who made significant contributions to our world in terms of peace and freedom, they were and are radicals, heretics, and maladjusted. And all three of those words basically mean people who don't do what society tells them they're supposed to do. So think about Jesus, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, the Dalai Lama, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Mother Teresa, Joan of Arc. These are all examples of heretics, radicals, and maladjusted individuals. And all of them became that way because they made a decision to cross the river of change. And the decision itself was and is a radical decision. And it's radical because no one who believes in the world wants to make that decision. If you believe in the world, you do not want to cross the river of change. And when Jesus says in that lesson, I want the peace of God, that few who have said those words have truly meant them, and that we only need to look around the world to see how few those are. That's the radical kind of decision that I'm talking about. And very few people actually do it. And that's why we can remember the names of every person who's made that kind of radical decision, because they make a deep and lasting impression, not just in our mind, they make an impression right here, right? Sorry about that. But case in point, they go right into the heart. They all made this one decision to cross the river of change. And that is the same as they made the decision to take complete and total responsibility for their experience. I'm definitely going to cry. I don't know who I was telling. I've been crying. Like, I've cried more in the last couple months than I've cried my entire life. It's perfect. I get in the tub and cry. I start to pray, I cry. And I'm crying because my heart is breaking open. It's like, this is not theory. This isn't happening to somebody else. This is our life. And it's not like I take it seriously. I'm just passionate. I'm all in. So if I cry, and you want to cry, cry. Do what you got. That's the right thing to do. This is crying time. So I want to read from chapter 21 of the text, where Jesus talks about the power of decision. Look at this book. Look at the, okay, it's been in the tub. I mean, it just, okay. So take this in, because Jesus is the original gangster. He's the original radical, all right? That's the OG right there. Listen to what he says. This is the only thing that you need do for vision, happiness, release from pain, and the complete escape from sin, all to be given you. Say only this, but mean it with no reservations, for here the power of salvation lies. I am responsible for what I see. This is so powerful. I chose the feelings that I experience, and I decided on the goal I would achieve, and everything that seems to happen to me, I asked for and received as I had asked. And then he says, deceive yourself no longer that you're helpless in the face of what is done to you. Acknowledge but that you have been mistaken, and all effects of your mistakes will disappear. So who's standing before you is a person who formerly identified themselves as black. And in order for me to actually embody this living document, I had to question that. I had to decide, am I willing to live in that limitation? That's why I cry, because nothing can be held. I can't hold on to even one thing and take total responsibility for my life. I can't be free unless I'm free. I can't be free and say, but, I get to be with black people and talk about how crappy I'm treated. And I don't get to do that if I want to be free. It doesn't work like that. That's my life's work, is to be free. So, amen. So that's why I showed up today, because we want to be free. We don't want to hold on to even one sacred idol. Not one that keeps us, able to talk to that group of people because we all can commiserate, or because I didn't get this thing when I was little either, so now we can be buddies. I don't want to be in that group. That's not the group that I want to be in. Do you all understand what I'm talking about? All right. So that's the potential of the power of decision. That's what Jesus, the radical, is talking about. So it's easy to see why very few people have been willing to make this decision, because the decision is total and it costs our entire way of seeing the world. In other words, it costs our personality. And from the point of view of the personality, it's impossible to comprehend how people can be held completely responsible for what happens to them, and that everything that seems to happen to them, they've asked for and received as they have asked. The little self, the little mind thinks, starts thinking about cases of extreme suffering like slavery and the abuse of children and terrible illness, and it rejects the statement that Jesus makes because the mind just can't fathom how it could be asked, how it asked for these things to happen to it and how it received them and how it could be responsible for suffering. So the mind, at least mine, I'll just keep it personal. My mind used to say things like, only saints and martyrs like Jesus could hold themselves to that standard, because they're not actually here in the real world where I am, where terrible things are happening to innocent people, right? That was kind of how I looked at it. I'm like, I don't know about that statement. But let's keep in mind that the personality self who enters the river bears absolutely no resemblance to the one that comes out the other side. That's the reason that statement is legitimate. It's not legitimate to my little self. My little self has no idea how that could be true. The one for whom, by whom, and to whom that is written is the one that comes out the other side. That's who that's for. Y'all feel that? Yeah. Okay. Somewhere during the crossing of this river of change, the finite self, that limited personality, is left behind. And from the point of view of spirit and of the Christ self, remember when Lisa talked about the Christ vision commitment? Well, I took that commitment on and I haven't let go of it. That has been my north. I'm committed to Christ vision. So from the point of view of the spirit and the Christ vision, only love consciousness emerges from the other side of that river. All the details stay on the other side. Mother Teresa said that she only saw Jesus in all of its distressing disguises. She spent all of her time with people who were called untouchable. In India, there are caste systems, and there was a caste called untouchables. She spent all of her time with untouchables, the poor, the sick, and she only ever saw Jesus, period. That is this side of the river, that is Christ vision. So if the one reading the passage about the power of decision is identified with and as a body and limited to time and circumstance, that limited mind experiences those ideas as insulting and outrageous. And that mind says, how dare you blame the victim? And what we have going on in our country right now is a fear of blaming victims. We're afraid to stand up because we don't want to offend. And I'm not interested in offending, but my freedom has nothing to do with offending anyone. It's my decision to stand up and be free and not be afraid. So let's look together at how our perception of this uncompromising statement of responsibility and power, how that perception can shift. And the shift in perception from being a victim to knowing ourselves as free is the crossing of the river of change. So let's look at Jesus's, I call it his freedom formula. So in lesson 23 of the workbook, I can escape from the world I see by what? Okay, let's all say that again. All together. I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. So in this lesson, paragraph 5, Jesus says, the idea for today introduces the thought that you are not trapped in the world you see. You're not trapped. Because, here's why, the cause of the world you see can be changed. You're not trapped. I'm not trapped. Because the cause of what I'm seeing can be changed. Now he's going to spell out his freedom formula. This change requires, first, here's step 1 of the freedom formula. First, the cause has to be identified. You have to look around and say, the reason I'm feeling frightened or limited or whatever upset I'm feeling is because of my own thoughts of attack. And let me get clear about thoughts of attack. It's not always like, I want to go after you. An attack thought can be, I don't have enough money, or that person has a nicer dress than I do, or attack thoughts take all forms. They're any thought that isn't love. That's an attack thought. So the first thing he says in his freedom formula, that you identify the cause of your suffering, which is my own thoughts. The second step is let it go. All right? First, identify, you know what I want to say. I want to say the S-bomb. I'm like, let that shit go, okay? Okay, let it go. So that it can be replaced. And he says that the first 2 steps require our cooperation, identifying the thoughts and letting them go. The third step, so at some point, here we go, we enter this river. Right here.
Baptism?
Could be, yeah, exactly. It's exactly right.
Will you repeat what she said?
She asked, is it a baptism? And I'm saying, yes, it is. So the first step is you identify the cause. That, the first time, and we're going to go into this, but the first time you identify the cause, you're stepping in. The next step into the middle of the river, this is where it's really deep. It's really, you can't touch the bottom right there. That's when you let it go. And then Jesus says, the third and final step, that's the step that God takes. And that's, God has already taken the step, but you have to be baptized. You have to let go of everything you think you are in order to get to the other side. You can't take this with you. It won't go past this thing. You're over your head. And Jesus says, you will realize that your images, all the images of limitation and lack, have already been replaced. Not will be replaced, have already been replaced. We are standing in it. Heaven is spread out on earth, but we don't see it. It's not getting here, it's here. And the only difference is, am I seeing the world of attack? Am I standing on the shore wondering, what's the matter? Why aren't I having fun? Why is my life such a mess? That's the difference. All right, so that's Jesus's 3-step freedom formula, and that's what we're going to be working with.
Do we have any clothes when we get to the other side?
Well, you know what? You need to get to the other side and then tell me. Okay? That's what we're up to. So, Jesus spells out the freedom formula of how to cross the river of change. Step 1, identify that the cause of the world you see is only your own attack thoughts. And attack thoughts can be thoughts of lack, fear, sickness, envy, hatred, inadequacy. All of these thoughts are attacks on our freedom, our inherent oneness with God. Taking step 1 is a big shift. It's a giant aha that is usually preceded by a period of loss, trials, and tribulations, because most of us don't question our way of thinking or our way of seeing the world unless we absolutely have to, like down on our knees, major crisis, like lost my job, lost my spouse, lost my house, my life got turned upside down, my kid is sick, I'm sick. And after a period of time of blaming others and blaming the world and saying this isn't working, then and only then most of us start questioning, what do you suppose I'm doing to contribute to this situation? How am I causing this to happen? Is that pretty much where our like most of us got here because our thinking wasn't working? Okay. Yeah. So Jesus says that step 1 is stop deceiving yourself that you're helpless in the face of what's done to you. And that's the first and most necessary step in jumping into that river of change that everyone who wants to be free has to take. That's that first step. So I'm going to give you some examples, stories from people who have gone through that river of change and come out the other side. The first story I want to talk to you about is Frederick Douglass. Who here knows just basically who Frederick Douglass is? An American abolitionist, was an ambassador to Dominican Republic, was an advisor to presidents, a publisher of a newspaper, learned, just awesome, off the charts guy, abolitionist. So when he was about 16 years old, he was sent, he was born a slave. He was born in the 1830-ish. He was born a slave. And when he was about 16, he was sent to a notorious slave owner who was famous for breaking slaves. And he was sent there because he had been caught teaching other slaves how to read and write and read the Bible. And indeed, true to this slave owner's reputation, the slave owner was wicked. So he whipped Frederick Douglass every day for just any reason at all. And Frederick Douglass realized that all of the joy he had ever experienced in his life was slipping away. His ability to have visions for his future, his enjoyment of the natural world, the song that had always been sung in his heart, he wasn't hearing it anymore. And one day, the slave owner tried to tie Frederick Douglass to a post so that he could whip him for a really long time. And Frederick Douglass fought back. And he had a fist fight with the slave owner. So in his mind, in that moment, Frederick Douglass made one of those radical decisions, okay? He initiated the launch sequence. That's what he did, a radical decision. He decided, I would rather die than be a slave. And this is radical, heretical, and maladjusted behavior for a slave. And he knew very well what the consequences of his actions would be, which is death. But he took total responsibility for his happiness. And he determined that his visions and his dreams were not going to be drained out of him by a slave owner. He would not be broken. Frederick Douglass bested the slave owner in the fist fight, and in an amazingly powerful scene in his autobiography. It was so gripped when I was reading it that I knew in my heart that from that moment forward, Frederick Douglass was never a slave again. And even though it was many years before he escaped from slavery, in his mind at that moment, he became free right then and there. And then he eventually did escape. He tried twice unsuccessfully, and all of those adventures are like mind-blowing. Every step that Frederick Douglass took, because he had gone through this river of change, he was lifted and carried. The things he did were impossible things, like crazy, dangerous, impossible things. He was lifted and carried every single time. So if you haven't read his story, it's a powerful story of faith. So he ran away, lived in the North, and his freedom was paid. His owners were paid by the abolitionists that he found in the North. So Frederick Douglass powerfully took step one of the power of decision. I'm responsible for what I see. Now, it's not the same as saying Frederick Douglass was caused slavery. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that this individual found himself in a situation. He said, I can't do this. This is not me. He took responsibility for what he was seeing. He said, I'm not trapped in the world I'm seeing, because the cause of it, my feelings, can be changed, and I can change the cause because it's my own attack thoughts. And the attack thoughts that Frederick Douglass had were thoughts of, I can't challenge this man. I'm supposed to be a slave. Those were the attack thoughts. That's what kept him a slave. It wasn't the circumstance. It was the thoughts. And the minute what was happening when he was having that fist fight, that's why he had to have a fist fight, because he was fighting himself. Every time he threw a punch, he was like, I can do this. That's why it was so compelling. Like, we've all been in situations where we didn't throw the punch because we were like, oh, I'm not the one who can do that. We've all held it in. And as he was in this fight, it was the fight in here that he bested. That's where he became free. So he said, I can't challenge this person. I'm supposed to remain a slave. And those are the reasons that he was suffering. Nelson Mandela, a person who changed the world, did so from a prison cell. He made a decision. He asked himself in prison for 26 years, who would I have to be, not later, but right now, to lead my country to peace, freedom, and equality for everyone? Who would I have to be? And he decided to let go of all the ideas that kept him in fear and hatred and resentment. And he became free in a prison cell the moment he decided to be the one. We are the ones we've been waiting for. He decided he was the one. And he became free. When he decided he was the one to lead all South Africans out of apartheid. All South Africans. And he prepared for that day that he would be released, never knowing if it was actually ever going to come. He developed a deep bond of friendship with the jailer who was assigned to him to guard him. And he developed that bond of friendship by giving the jailer respect. Not deference, not groveling, seeing the humanity, really seeing that person as a person. He asked the jailer, as their relationship deepened, to please teach him how to speak and write in Afrikaans, which is the language of the ruling party, so that if or when he emerged from jail, he could speak with and to the ruling party in their own language. And on the day of his release after 26 years, Nelson Mandela delivered a speech in Afrikaans, was elected president of the country, and led the dismantling of apartheid. And here's what Nelson Mandela says about freedom. He said, "To walk free is not merely to cast off chains, but it's to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. Consider the possibility that even your enemies can change. Give them a chance to change." So Nelson Mandela got in that river, took step one. He plunged into that river of change. He took complete, do you know how easy it is to be in a prison cell and be irked? Like beyond, like, right? They made him sleep on the floor. He couldn't see his children grow up, his wife, his I mean, do you know how many reasons there would be, how many temptations to just be, okay. He took complete responsibility for his sight. And he chose the feelings he experienced. He decided on the goal he would achieve. And everything that seemed to happen to him, he asked for. And you know what he asked for? He asked for help. And you know what he got? He got help. Yeah. He changed his mind. He asked for help and he received it. So Jesus says, you're not trapped in the world you see, because the cause of the world can be changed. And this change requires, first, that you identify the cause. The cause is always my thinking. So Frederick Douglass, Nelson Mandela stepped in the river of change when they questioned their status as victims, and they identified the limiting thoughts and behaviors that were causing them to suffer. As soon as we do that, we relinquish, we give back the card that says I'm a victim. Okay, I can't, no, we got to give up the victim card, and that's part of where we're headed. Everybody has a handicap sticker. Do you all know that? Do you all know that? So between now and the time that we get to try this on, I want you to start thinking, what is my handicap sticker? What is that thing I keep giving myself permission to do that is keeping me small? And you're going to throw your cane down. You're going to turn in your handicap sticker, and you're never going to take advantage of perks of being the victim again. Because being a victim has perks. And you got to make a decision. Are those perks worth it? Or are you going to have to park somewhere in the parking lot and walk your ass to where you're going? All right? Okay. So I'm getting hot now. All right. Okay. So now that we're in the river, let's keep going. Step 2 of Jesus's 3-step formula is acknowledging you have been mistaken and being willing to let go of the thoughts that have been causing your suffering. So step 2 is the dismantling of the personality. It's the willingness to relinquish our position no matter how right we are. Step 2 is the end of the self as we know it. I'm going to get right up in this camera. Step 2 is the end of the self as we know it. And that is why it takes enormous courage to be free. The self does not want to die. You noticed? It wants to be present at its own funeral, narrating the process. Have you noticed that? Oh, you're doing really good. You're doing really good. You know, like you're trying to get rid of, oh, that's you. That was a good thing you just said. You know, that's the ego. So letting go, acknowledging that we're mistaken is what humility actually is. So Jesus talks about finding our true power by letting go of littleness in chapter 15 of the text in a section called Littleness versus Magnitude. And it's so beautiful. Jesus is such a good writer. I'm just going to share what he says here. Okay. There's a deep responsibility you owe yourself, and one which you must learn to remember all the time. The lesson will seem hard at first, but you'll learn to love it when you realize that it's true and constitutes a tribute to your power. You who have sought and found littleness, remember this. Every decision that you make stems from what you think you are and represents the value that you have put upon yourself. Every little thing you seek and think you want defines you as little to yourself. Believe that the little can content you, and by limiting yourself, you will not be satisfied. For your function is not little. And it's only by finding your function and fulfilling it that you can escape from littleness. Woo! If I ask my personality to tell me what my function is, I am in misery. My personality is identified with a body, time, and circumstances. Therefore, my personality tells me stuff like my function is to fear and attack other people, or defend what's mine, or resist what's unfolding. Once we've stepped into the river of change, we have to keep moving or we'll get swept away and drown. And once we know that our thoughts are the cause of the suffering, we have to be willing to give them up immediately in order to receive the third and final step and cross the river. So now, I invited Martin Luther King. He's here. He's been here. He walks with me a lot. So he's here. And we're going to spend a little time with Dr. King. So we're going to go back in time. He's going to tell us a story about how he crossed this river. He was a young preacher. He moved with his family to Alabama to be the pastor at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. The bus boycott began, and he was the moral and organizational leader of it. So Dr. King became the target of hate. He received phone calls, like sometimes up to 40 calls a day, threatening him and his family. And he and his wife, Coretta, had one child at the time. And these calls would come in at all times of the day and night. And sometimes Coretta would answer, and the person on the other end would say something really vile and threatening, or they'd wait until one of them picked up the phone, and then they'd hang up. And when Martin answered the phone, he'd try to reason with the person, but the caller would always cut him off. And at first, he kind of took the calls in stride because he thought, well, it's just a few hotheads who, they'll run out of steam when they realize that Coretta and I aren't trying to fight with them. But as the weeks passed, Martin Luther King saw that the threats were in earnest. And from friends of his who were sort of in the know, they began to warn him that they were hearing from reliable sources that plans were being made to take his life. And Martin Luther King felt himself start to falter and grow in fear. And for the first time, he started realizing that something could happen to him. So he started telling his church members and the people who would come to these organizational meetings about the bus boycott, he started telling them, if you find me dead, do not retaliate. And every day, someone warned him that they had overheard of plans to get rid of him. And every night, he was going to bed with this feeling of deep uncertainty as to what was to come. So I'm going to read from his own words. Okay. One night, toward the end of January, I settled into bed late after a strenuous day. Coretta had already fallen asleep, and just as I was about to doze off, the telephone rang. An angry voice said, "Listen, nigger, we've taken all we want from you, Before next week, you'll be sorry you ever came to Montgomery. I hung up, but I couldn't sleep. It seemed that all of my fears had come down on me at once. I had reached the saturation point.
What book is that?
The Radical King, of course. Escaping from the world we see requires first that the cause of the world we see be identified. So Dr. King said all of his fears came down on him all at once. Dr. King realized that it was his fear and his fearful thinking that was actually the root of what was causing him to suffer. Now notice, he wasn't saying he was running around trying to figure out which people were after him or how to stop the people. That wasn't where he was going with this. The only place he was dealing with was what was going on in his mind where the fear thoughts were. He went right to the cause of suffering. That was step one. So then he went immediately to step two, which is to realize you're mistaken and to let go of the cause of the world you see, to realize your way of seeing is mistaken and you're willing to let it go and let your way of being, your personality, be dismantled. So let's continue with his story. So he had reached the saturation point. I got out of bed and began to walk the floor. Finally, I went to the kitchen and heated a pot of coffee. I was ready to give up. With my cup of coffee sitting untouched before me, I tried to think of a way to move out of the picture without appearing a coward. Now, this is Martin Luther King we're talking about. We're all the same. In this state of exhaustion, when my courage had all but gone, I decided, I love this man, I decided to take my problem to God. With my head in my hands, I bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud. The words I spoke to God that midnight are still vivid in my memory. I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right, but now I'm afraid. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I'm at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone. So we're going to go with Dr. King right now to step 3. Jesus says that the first 2 steps in escaping the world we see require our cooperation, and we have to be the ones who identify the cause. We have to be the ones to let go of the thoughts of fear and suffering. But the final step does not require our cooperation. Jesus says, your images have already been replaced. So by taking the first 2 steps, this is Jesus' words, you take the first 2 steps, you will see that this is so. And Martin Luther King, one of my favorite things he says is, faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. That's what Jesus said, right? If you don't see the whole staircase, it's not required. That's above our pay grade. All right, so here's Dr. King's experience of step 3, when he sees that the images he had in his mind have already been replaced, and because he took the first 2 steps, he will see that this is so. So here's the rest of his story. So we left him off. He's praying to God in his kitchen at midnight. And he says, I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone. And here he says, at that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I had never experienced him before. It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, stand up for righteousness, for truth, and God will be at your side forever. Almost at once, my fears began to go. My uncertainty disappeared. I was ready to face anything. His images were already replaced. 3 days after this, they bombed his house. So luckily, or not luckily, his wife and baby were home. They heard something happen on the front porch. They went to the back of the house and the bomb exploded. The wife and baby were not hurt. Dr. King was speaking to his congregation at the time. He went home. Dr. King was calm. Coretta was calm. And a large gathering of people came into the neighborhood with guns, and they were just all up in arms. And Dr. King calmed them all down and averted what could have been a very violent situation. That's the peace of God. He wanted the peace of God, and he got the peace of God. Radicals are radical because they don't react the way the majority of people react. They demonstrate that the world we believe exists isn't there. When Jesus left for the desert for 40 days, he left as the Son of Man. And when he came back as the Son of God. That's what this is. You enter this as a body. You leave this as everything. You leave this as God's will incarnated. Jesus crossed the river of change. He was tempted over and over again to use attack thoughts, to blame the world, to look for power in the world. And each time he was tempted by those thoughts, he identified the cause and he let them go. And he was given the images that replaced all of the thoughts of temptation. He cleared his mind and he completed the dismantling of his personality. He went from being a person, a body with circumstances governed by time, to being God's son, free of time, free of body, free of circumstance, at peace, and available for everyone, everywhere. There's no conqueror in the world who still has an army going. Jesus conquered 2,000 years ago, and he's got more people following him. Nobody else has that going on. He's everywhere all the time. The Dalai Lama crossed the river of change. When his country was taken over by the Chinese, what did he say? I will not let anyone's behavior corrupt my mind. I won't give away my happiness. It takes courage to cross the river of change and to relinquish the trinkets of the world that tie us to our victim status. You have to die in the river in order to be reborn. The one who emerges from the other side is radical, heretical, and maladjusted to a society where everyone is a victim, blaming others, judging, and condemning. But for those who cross the river, our experience is freedom and peace. The night before he was assassinated, Martin Luther King said that he wouldn't have chosen to be born at any other time. He said, I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period of time to see what's unfolding. I'm going to end this portion with the last paragraph of Martin Luther King's speech, which was the last speech he gave. He said, well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop and I don't mind. Like anybody, I'd like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. So let's give that radical a round of applause. All right. So,
That radical Kimberly Cartwright on the floor.
bam, bam, bam. Yay. All right. So now it's our turn. There is no document that can set us free. There's no Emancipation Proclamation document that can set us free. Not even A Course in Miracles can set us free. We have to take the steps. We have to be willing to jump in the river of change, to reach that place of letting go, and know that we will be lifted up. But we have to be willing to die in the river, to let all of our littleness die. And I'm leading us through the river right now in the form of a visualization / meditation. We're taking Jesus' 3-step freedom formula together, and we're coming out the other end as radicals and heretics and maladjusteds who walk the world free and at peace. Who's with me? Who's with me? Come on. All right. All right. That's what I'm talking about. You can't be like,
Ask the live streamers.
Okay.
Ask the live streamers to put I am.
Okay, put I am. If you're with us, put I am. That's your hand up. Yeah. I am.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So after you've done that, live streamers, find a comfortable, safe place to sit. If you're driving, don't do it, but close your eyes. Ground, take some deep breaths. So we're going to do a little visualization here. So I want you to review, where are you holding on to your handicap sticker? Where are you being a victim? Just let it come. See it. And just look at that way of being, that thought. And I want you to identify the benefits that come with it. And it's important because that's part of what's kept us in that relationship with that status as a victim of something. And you're not bad. We're looking at it because we have to know what's keeping us out of the river. So just take a look at that. Think about the friends that you've made around that victim status. All of the perks. You might even have a little pride around it. You might have possessions that are associated, that keep you involved or activated in that victim status. And now let's shift a little bit. I want you to start looking at what that status is costing you. What are some of the ways that it's keeping you small? How is it limiting you and your vision? Where is that feeling of constriction located in your body? How is it showing up? What are some of the thoughts of fear around relinquishing that victim status? And we're stepping now into this river by acknowledging in our minds, as we look at both the perks and the costs, that we're responsible for the way we're seeing our life. So just as I'm speaking, look at the costs and the perks and just know we're responsible for the way we're seeing this. And you can even say it in your mind with me. I'm choosing my feelings. I'm choosing this experience. That's step one. And right now, I'm letting this go. I'm willing to let this go. I'm in the middle of the river. And as confronting and difficult as this is, I'm letting this go. It's deep. It's over my head. I can't touch the bottom. I'm letting this go. And just as surely as we let this go, you are lifted by Jesus. You are lifted and carried. Allow your images to be replaced because you have Christ vision. You have a vision, a dream. You have something so powerful that wants to come through you into the world that has been blocked by that victim status. Let it arise. This is what Jesus is inviting you to be. This is your power. Let your Christ vision replace all the thoughts of littleness and let yourself ascend to that mountaintop. Stand up on that mountain and just declare, I'm here to do God's will. I'm here to be everything God wants me to be. Nothing can hold me back, and I'm free. Place your hand on your heart. And I'm going to read Jesus' proclamation of emancipation from lesson 97, I am spirit. And as you're listening to these words with your hand on your heart, you're signing your own emancipation proclamation in your soul with the pen and ink of your total trust and willingness. Take this in. Spirit am I, holy child of God, free of all limits, safe and healed and whole, free to forgive and free to save the world. Breathe in and breathe out. Okay. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. We're going to stand up. Take your time. But we're going to do symbolically, we're going to hold hands and we're going to jump. Because this jump, we're going to jump into Jesus' arms. So when you're ready, let's all stand up. And we're just going to just hold hands in rows. It doesn't mean everyone has to hold everyone's hand. Hold somebody's hand because you don't want to jump alone. You're never alone. So don't jump alone. All right. So think about those 3 steps. You identified the cause. It's my thoughts. You said, I'm willing to put away the handicap sticker. I'm going to let this go. And I'm going to be lifted and carried. And that is what you're jumping into. You are jumping into the arms of God. It doesn't have to be a big jump. It's just symbolic. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, jump. Beautiful. All right. All right. Come back down to your seat. Everybody left the earth. Awesome. Yay. Woo! All right. I don't know what time it is. What time is it? Oh, we got 2 minutes. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to do was,
do we acknowledge anything for the live stream?
Oh, so, okay, yes, thanks, Bill. So live streamers, if you're in a place to do it now, do it or do it later, but please jump. And if you can invite a family member, a neighbor, a friend, a colleague, tell them what you're doing. Say, I'm here to be free. And then ask them to jump with you. Because often, if we're looking down and it's a long way down, maybe by myself I couldn't do it, but if I'm holding on to my friend's hand, I'll jump because we're not alone. So grab somebody's hand and say, I'm jumping and I'm letting go of that thing I've been using my whole life to keep me small, and let them witness you. So thank you so much, live streamers. And I'm inviting you now to sing a song with us. So as I was preparing for this talk, this song kept coming into my mind. I'm like, oh, why am I hearing this song? And it turns out the place I was born in the South, the slaves that lived there originated the song. I was born in St. Helens Island, Beaufort, South Carolina, and there are sea islands there, and a lot of the slaves were left alone because slave owners couldn't find them out in all these sea islands and everything, but they used boats to go everywhere. And they sang the song, Michael, Row Your Boat Ashore. And the Michael is Archangel Michael. And we know one thing about Archangel Michael. Jesus said the same thing. I came with the sword. The sword is discernment. It's the ability to see what's true and what's not true. Right? That's what that experience of jumping into that river is. The reason that we can jump in the river is the stuff that was holding us on the bank isn't true. So Michael, row your boat ashore, hallelujah. Why would a slave sing that song unless they weren't slaves? Do y'all feel what I'm saying? Yeah. A free person says, discernment, take me where I'm going, hallelujah. That's how it works. Yeah. So we're going to sing, Jesus rows our boat ashore, hallelujah. And then these are some of the verses, like, I'm responsible for what I see, hallelujah, nothing can ever really happen to me, hallelujah. Okay, so let's just start from the beginning, and don't worry, you can just mumble, or it's all good, and then we'll finish. So here we go. We're going to start with, let's stand up. Yeah, thank you, Cal. And thank you, I love you all. Thank you, because you guys watched me. I walked through that river right now. I've never said these things out loud to a bunch of people before. It's very confronting. It's not easy. It's totally worth it. I'd do it again. Okay? So here we go. Jesus rows our boat ashore. Hallelujah. Say that again, yeah. Jesus rows our boat ashore. Hallelujah. Now, I'm responsible for what I see. I'm responsible for what I see. Hallelujah. Nothing can ever really happen to me. Nothing can ever really happen to me. Hallelujah. I choose the feelings that I feel. I choose the feelings that I feel. Hallelujah. I choose the goals, and that's the deal. I choose the goals, and that's the deal. Hallelujah. Everything that seems to happen to me, hallelujah, is my responsibility. Hallelujah. Now we'll just end with 2 times Jesus row. Jesus rows our boat ashore. Hallelujah. Jesus rows our boat ashore. Hallelujah. Thank you. Thank you, live streamers. I love you. Bye.